You've entered Bookstorm with Kristen Civiletto and me, Chris Storm. This is a podcast devoted to best-selling books that matter, books that make a difference. We're diving down deep with beloved authors about their stories. We're exposing hot-button topics and heartfelt themes, the issues that affect each of us in our own lives, as siblings, parents, partners, friends, as human beings. We're braving new ideas, fresh thoughts, hard lessons, and important truths. Those kinds of things that stay with us long after we turn the last page and close the book. Welcome back to Bookstorm, all of you book lovers. We're very happy that you've joined us again, and we know why you have. We're bringing you the very best authors and the very best selling fiction. We've got someone that we've been following for quite a while now. We're very big fans of his. It's a new book coming out in December when this podcast will air, and we're going to say a very warm welcome to VICTOR METHOS. Welcome to Bookstorm.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me.
And we're going to show for our YouTube watchers, we're here to talk about The Silent Watcher, a thriller like none other. You are going to be sitting on the edge of your seat. Kristen and I were obsessed. Before we get into the book, though, I want to tell some of our listeners just a little bit of your background because you've got an interesting bio and a pretty cool history. So Victor immigrated to the U.S. from Kabul, Afghanistan, at the age of 9. He wrote his first short story in English at the age of 10. He is the best-selling author of over 50 novels. He's been nominated for some wonderful and prestigious awards like the Edgar Award. You were the recipient of the 2020 Harper Lee Prize for Legal Fiction. That's huge. You attended law school at the University of Utah, and you've been a prosecutor and a criminal defense attorney. Okay, having conducted, I see, more than 100 trials. That is amazing.
Wow, you guys make me sound so much more impressive than I actually am.
We don't believe you. The writing is true. We're seeing it right here. I love this that I saw in your bio, and I have to share it. When Victor was 13, his best friend was interrogated by the police for over 8 hours, finally confessing to a crime he did not commit. His friend's traumatic experience inspired Victor to fight for justice for those who don't have a voice. Thank you for that. We hear that story far too often. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. No, he read that. I talked to him a couple of years ago, and he read that on my bio. He's like, "What? We've been best friends for 40 years. I didn't know that happened." I'm like, "It was you." He's like, that inspired you?
That's traumatic for anybody, especially a child.
Oh, I mean, he was just a little kid. They brought in these full-grown adult detectives to yell at him. They wouldn't let him use the bathroom. They wouldn't let him eat. And so finally, after I think it was like 8 to 10 hours of interrogation without his parents, they wouldn't let his parents come. One of the detectives said, "Look, just tell us you did it and we'll let you go." And he's like, "Fine, I did it." And then they arrested him immediately.
Wow.
And I know who the guys who really did it. So did he. It was some football players. It wasn't him. My friend was just a nerdy math nerd. And so I saw what it did. Like his mom didn't believe him. His fellow churchgoers didn't believe him. People at school didn't believe him. They all thought he was like this really bad person. Wow. And I knew the truth. And so I just saw it like slowly just eat at him. I mean, he got like suicidally depressed. Wow. And I just thought like, wow, if the police can do this, like they can do anything. If they can ruin someone's life like this. So it kind of just, I didn't even know criminal defense attorney was a job back then. But when I learned about it, I was like, yeah, I think this is what I want to do with my life.
Sounds like you were meant to witness that.
Yeah.
Because you had a passion and a gift and you're fulfilling it. Now you're doing it with the writing of these stories. And I just want to end by saying you have #1 best-selling books in the US, the UK, India, Australia, all throughout the world. It's quite an achievement. You live in Southern Utah. Super excited to dive down into this Silent Watcher.
Great. I'm excited to talk about it. I enjoyed writing it.
Well, Victor, I like to give our listeners just a little bit of what's going on behind the story. And I just want to point out, too, not only do you have this really cool cover, you have an endorsement from Robert Dugoni. He says, gritty, authentic, and packs a punch. He's a longtime friend of Bookstorm, too. And so that is high praise, but well deserved in this
Oh,
story.
thank you. I love Bob. He's the nicest guy.
He sure is.
We do too.
Now, I won't give away any spoilers, but just a little bit of what's going on. If you want to add anything, that would be awesome.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
In this story, we meet Piper Danes, and she is an attorney making some big time career changes. She's leaving a big law firm where she was secure and had it pretty good. And she's going to become what we call a guardian ad litem, or a gal. And she was once in a position where a gal was able to speak into her life and help her. So she had a very strong feeling about paying that forward and doing the same for other clients.
Yeah.
Now, in this situation, she's entering into kind of a pilot program that was orchestrated by a very formidable judge, Hope Dawson. I love that character.
Mhm.
And in that program, she is acting as a gal during the investigation stage of a criminal case. So it
Mhm.
puts her in close contact with other criminal investigators, with a detective, and a host of other people. They also come up against, though, the criminals and the people trying to harm others. Now, in this situation, her client is the sole survivor of a horrific murder of the rest of her family, and they have not found the person yet. So she is involved in that early stage in the hunt, in the uncovering. And pretty soon she realizes that she and others are in a great deal of danger. Now, I'm not going to say too much more unless you want to reveal it. But in this story, I loved the relationships between Piper with her detective that she was working with. His name is Lazarus Holloway. And of course, the judge and her client. It was a
Yeah.
really interesting, intricate relationship thing that you explored there. Did you want to add anything to that backdrop?
No. The guardian ad litem. One of my really good friends is a guardian ad litem, and so I'm just laughing because when he reads this, the guardian ad litem, the job is not exactly like I predicted it. I went full CSI on it. CSI is like, if you actually look at what forensic people do, it is grinding, dull work, but they're like superheroes on the show, right? Because you got to make it exciting. So I did add some things for Piper to do that guardian ad litems typically don't do. So there is some of that in there, but the core of it is the same. Like, they're representing these kids that don't have anybody else in their life. Their parents have turned on them. Everybody that's supposed to protect them has abandoned them or abuses them. So literally, this lawyer is the only person looking out for them. And that's a lot of pressure. Like, my buddy that I was just talking about, I mean, he's had to stand in court and watch kids return to really abusive parents and really horrific circumstances. And it weighs on him. I can tell. He ages much quicker than I do.
It's just horrible. I don't think there's any crime worse than a crime done to a child.
Oh,
it
yeah.
just hurts all of our hearts. So I want to say for our listeners, this crime is terrifyingly real. It is horrifically possible. You took us down the very dark psychopathology of a killer. Lazarus describes a killer like this. I'm going to quote this. They got great big holes right in the middle of them. No matter what they do, they'll never fill them, but they damn sure are going to try. But then he adds this, but people like us, we know hurting people won't fill the hole, so we hurt ourselves. Wow. It's two really deep thoughts right there. There is a hypothesis that evil people are created from some type of childhood or current trauma and abuse. And I had to ask, who's the author in creating this psychopathic killer? Can any murder or any crime be explained away or excused for any psychological reason? And why do we try? As the reader, I'm thinking, why do we look for a redemptive quality in even a murderer? Is it that we just want to see some humanity?
That's an interesting question. I read a fantastic book that really influenced my thinking on this. It was called The Third Chimpanzee. And so the title comes from the fact that this biologist says if aliens came down and classified all the species on Earth, we actually wouldn't be a different species. We would be classified as a third type of chimpanzee because our behavior and genetics are so similar. And so murder has unfortunately always been a part of us. And I've studied evil intently. I mean, really, I've defended serial killers, and they're really awful people. And I've been obsessed with evil for a long time, and I still don't know how I feel about it. One thing I do know is that the killers like Ted Bundy, the Zodiac, I mean, I found them interesting in studying them, but they weren't who I was really obsessed with. The guys I were obsessed with, like I read about this one guy in the former Yugoslavia who was in charge of like a rape camp, where they would take the women and the children. And they said that he personally was responsible for at least 2,000 murders. He personally killed 2,000 people. He was just this little guy. He had a family. He went to church. He had a job. And what made him fascinating to me is that after the war was over, he went back to civilian life, and they didn't find him for 20 years. He had nothing, like no crimes. He was just this quiet little guy who never did anything horrible again. And the reason those guys fascinate me is because that kind of tells me that it could be inside all of us. We might all have that potential as the third chimpanzee. We just need to be put in the right circumstances. Mm-hmm. That's a much scarier thought to me than, 1% of the population are Ted Bundys.
Mm-hmm. Maybe that's why we're so enthralled with it. Maybe there's a fear that we have a little bit of that inside of us. So in your research of evil, in this book, you outlined 2 interesting diagnoses: schizophrenia. Just going to say for our listeners, this is a detachment or lack of interest in social relationships. Then you talked about delusional personality. This is a grandiose feeling, or I've been persecuted in life and I'm better than everyone. They struggle with a belief that they possess extraordinary insights and abilities. So these are 2 psychological reasons for evil. But what if it's just you just plain like to hurt people? Could it be?
Oh, sure. Yeah. No, I had a sex offender client who I got this great deal for, and I had a conversation with him. He's like, "You can't let me get out this soon." He's like, "I'll do it again." And so, he knew it was wrong. He knew he wanted to stop, but he literally couldn't. So it wasn't even enjoyment for him. I don't even know if he enjoyed it. It was just this compulsion that was just overwhelming for him that he couldn't stop.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Wow. Well, I want to switch gears a little bit and go back to something you were talking about a second ago, and that is that relationship between a gal and their client, these children. And I'm asking about this because I did serve as a gal once, and it was one of the most difficult things I ever did in my career for the reasons you said. These are not easy choices. And in this situation, many times gals are used in the legal system to protect the interests of the child. And sometimes those are in opposition to the interests of the parents. So now the gal is in that really difficult spot between representing the client, the child, against what the parents want to do. And a lot of divorces, this kind of gets things in a bad direction. Sometimes we see this frequently. So I wanted to ask you, Piper really fought to protect Sophie's interests. And sometimes that frustrated the investigation of the murder of what happened to her family. Why was she doing that? Was that because of her training with regard to children and what she knew that maybe Piper needed?
Yeah. So she's a mercenary for one client, right? That's the way I came to view being a defense lawyer and a guardian ad litem, because some of my clients have nobody else in the world looking out for them. They have no one looking for their interests. They have no one they can talk to. They have no one that believes them. So I just made a choice, and I think all good defense attorneys do, that I am a mercenary for this person, and I will do whatever it takes to help this particular person. And so you really have to take that mentality. And I took it. People would ask me sometimes, how do you defend these people? And I always said, like, I'm defending the Constitution. I love the Constitution, and I love what it represents. John Adams actually said, they asked him, this was toward the end of his life. They asked him what his proudest moment was in his life. And he said it was when he defended the British soldiers as their defense attorney in the Boston Massacre. He said, because we showed the British that we had the rule of law, and we weren't just vindictive, and we weren't, a monarchy like they were. That's always stuck with me. I'm even getting teary-eyed just thinking about it now. That's how big of a law nerd I am.
Well, that caused so much turmoil. And so even against that turmoil, he stood his ground.
Yeah. Oh, so man. What a founding fathers. Point. Wow. Yeah, I am I'm a refugee to this country. So when I first read about the founding fathers, I'm like, why doesn't everybody know about these guys? This is incredible. Like, I mean, Thomas Jefferson wasn't satisfied. They found these pyramids. I'm sorry, I'm just going off on tangents. Is that all
It's
right?
all good.
No,
Yeah, we love
please.
it.
But Thomas Jefferson, they found these pyramids in Virginia, ancient pyramids, and Thomas Jefferson thought they were built by the Native Americans. And of course, at the time, they thought Native Americans, all those savages, couldn't build that. There's no way. But archaeology couldn't figure anything out. We didn't have the tools. So he invented a new field of archaeology to date these things and show that they were by Native Americans. He wasn't an archaeologist. He was just like, no, I think I'm right. I'm going to go ahead and invent this entirely new field and see what it is. So when people talk about our Constitution, I don't think they realize how much genius is behind it, how much human thought went into it. It's glorious. And most of that thought, by the way, the essence of it was given to us by a woman. Most people don't know that. John Adams, in a letter, Abigail Adams wrote to him. She wrote almost in a postscript. During the Constitutional Convention, she wrote, "And don't forget that all men would be tyrants if they could." And Adams said, I obsessed about that just for weeks afterwards, that all men would be tyrants if they could. And that's what our Constitution is. It's to prevent anybody from becoming a tyrant. That's the essence of it.
Yeah.
So I don't even remember what I was talking about. You guys got me talking about the Constitution. And all
No,
this
we're passion. We were talking about passion, because that's exactly what Piper did. Is she took that role very seriously for her clients.
Yeah.
And the reason why goes back to everything you just said, that there are principles and values upon which we stand. And one of them is the protection of people in our legal system, especially the vulnerable. I love that. By the way, I have a book of Abigail and John Adams' love letters.
Oh,
and
wow.
They are so amazing, that whole little relationship there. So thank you for bringing that up. That was pretty cool.
It's hard to read those sometimes because they're so eloquent. And then you go on like Twitter or Instagram and see what people are saying now. And you're like, ah.
I don't know if we've come a long way or gone backwards.
Yeah.
Well, I have to bring up something a little different, because throughout the murders, we see Lazarus and Piper draw from their own life experiences and stories to arrive at sometimes very different conclusions. Judge Dawson said, the problem with theories is that you have them first, then you go out looking for the evidence. You're asking the evidence to fit your theory rather than the other way around. We've seen this before. We even, those of us who are not lawyers who've seen enough criminal shows and read enough books, the criminal defense attorney Russo then goes on to say to the criminal, and this sort of blew my mind, I don't like you, but here's the thing. I wouldn't want you to go to prison. Do you want to know why? Because I love winning more than I dislike you. Whoa. So then now we've got selfish motives and personal goals that skew our justice system. And listen, give us a clue. This really goes on. I'm thinking it's fun to talk about in novels, but it's kind of some scary stuff.
You would think so, but nature is far more efficient than we think it is. There's this city in Denmark that tried an experiment. They had no traffic laws or traffic signs or anything. They got rid of everything. They reduced their accidents by something by like 90%. And so a lot of these thinkers came up with this idea of spontaneous order, that if we let nature take its course, it'll figure itself out. And it's kind of like that in the justice system. You get a fierce defense attorney, you get a fierce prosecutor, they're going to meet somewhere in the middle, because 99% of cases plea bargain. So that's what you need. You need that on both sides. If you get one side that's not as passionate or as fierce, that's when they're going to get overwhelmed. Because really winning a case that I found wasn't about intelligence or anything like that. It was about obsession. There were cases that I would get that I would become obsessed with, and I would just think about them all day. And I knew the prosecutor wasn't thinking about it all day. Mm-hmm. So I think we need to kind of aim for that area.
Mm-hmm. I call that not obsession, but a passion.
Yeah.
And maybe even a gift that you even spotted it when you were a kid and you had a heart for it. Why I'm a very big believer that your passion is your gift, is your talent. You're good at it and you love to do it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, anything that I tell my kids, because they're entering their teenage years now, asking me what they should do with their life. And I just say, whatever was play to you as a kid and made the hours go by like minutes, that's what you need to devote your life to, whatever that is. Video games, I don't care what it is. I let them have whatever you guys want to do, you go do it. Just make sure you love it. And that's all you need to do. So my kids have crazy dreams. Like my 12-year-old wants to restart the Chuck E. Cheese franchise and call it his own thing and build animatronics.
I love it.
I do too. I miss
Chuck E. Cheese.
I do too. This is one of my favorite places.
Oh, that's funny. I want to ask you a last question about these very complicated personalities in your story, because especially Judge Dawson, but I suspect she's your next book. So I want to focus on Piper and Lazarus. Now,
Mm.
they were thrown together in a work relationship. They don't know one another. And immediately there's some friction. And they would ask one another probing questions, trying to get to know the other. And they would usually deflect.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to ask you, how did these two begin the process of trying to trust one another? Because trust seems like a very important part of this particular relationship. What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I always tell my kids, I had this talk with my daughter yesterday in the car driving home from school. But I said, if you don't remember anything else I tell you, just remember to always be honest. Always, always, always be honest. It's just my default programming. I think it started with a quote I heard from Sean Connery of all people when I was a kid. He said he was known for being just like 100% honest in everything he did. And the interviewer asked him, "Why are you like that?" And he said, um, "When you lie, it's your problem, but when you tell the truth, it's somebody else's problem."
Mm.
And so I always push that honesty. And I really feel like when you're perfectly honest, you can tell other people who are perfectly honest and they kind of sync. You kind of feel their energy, they feel your energy, and you kind of sync. You can tell when someone's fake or, I always felt like juries, especially, they have like invisible tentacles. They can just detect deception. You know what I mean? And so I always took the stance of just to be perfectly honest with them, and it usually worked. So I think these two just need to start slowly opening up, and honesty will kind of form that connection for them by the end.
Yeah, I love it because both are dealing with a lot from their past,
Mhm.
and you can see little glimpses of it in their interactions. So very well done, very well drawn characters.
Oh, thank
Um,
you.
all right. So before we let you go, we have a last question. I lied when I said the other one was the last, but we want to know if you can share a glimpse of what you're working on, maybe what's coming next. And I know you can't give any details, but we would love it if you wanted to share something.
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, I just finished the sequel and sent it into my publisher. And you're right, Judge Dawson was very prominent in that. I actually, when I start writing a book, I don't know what the ending's going to be. So the ending kind of surprised me on this one. I was like, oh, wow, really? All right. Well, it's not my decision. So when you write for a long time, because I've been writing since I was in fifth grade, when you write for a really long time, it's just like how you get good at anything else, like driving. I do it almost unconsciously. Like I sit in a room and I listen to my characters talk and I write down what they say. So that's the funnest part for me, is because I'm surprised too. You know, readers will be like, "I can't believe that happened." I'm like, "Neither can I."
I love that. Well, thank you for sharing that. I want to tell our listeners how to get in touch with you. They can go to your excellent website. It's victormethos.com. And that's METHOS for people who are listening. And also, they can connect with you on Facebook, on X, on Instagram. You even have an email account on there. And we're just so thankful that you came on to talk about this really, really cool book. We've
Oh,
talked about heavy stuff, but this was so entertaining as well.
oh, I appreciate it. I live in a town of like 600 people, so I never get to talk about books with anybody.
You can come on anytime.
Oh, thank you.
Come back
Thank you. It was a
again.
blast. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yes, we could have talked about that book for an hour, but what's tricky with a book like this is we don't want to give any spoilers away. So Victor and you and I know the ending of this, but nobody else can know. And it was a shocking ending. It was fascinating. And the thing that hit me the most is this abuse of children. It's just such a tough topic to enter into. He dealt with it in a very good way, though. Like I guess in a way he said he likes to speak truth, and I find that very honorable. Even when you're backed into a corner, that you're not working your way out of it in lying. I mean, I think truthfulness is honorable. It speaks so loudly to who you are. And I feel like this book had a lot of truth in it, truth about what's happening in the world, truth about the justice system. And I really loved it. I wanted to ask you one question. So there was one other question. I wanted to get it in, but we went quick. There was an interesting debate between Piper and Lazarus. Piper said, I believe there's a God watching over us and that we return to him when we die. Why he lets horrible things happen and why good people are always suffering, I don't know. Lazarus says, why do you assume suffering is bad? Maybe it makes us what we are. I kind of liked that.
I did too. And, and I love that you brought that up too, because that actually was thematically something underlying this entire book. Without it being an overt subject of discussion, these two were probing each other. What forms you? What do you put your hope in? And I loved that part of the story. We didn't even raise that. I'm really glad you did.
And just that, when we are enduring suffering, and we all
Yeah.
do at some point in our life, to be able to walk away from it and say, I did not suffer for no reason.
Yeah.
I did come out stronger, wiser, more courageous, a mentor to someone else who's suffering through the same thing I did. Something good come out of it. I love that kind of story.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is a cool book. There was another aspect too that kind of struck me, and that was this idea of doing what you love and a passion that you're drawn to. Because, Piper had a good situation, making a lot of money. She had a lot of job security. She left that because there was something in her that wanted something to be more productive, that had meaning for her. And a lot of people, I think, wrestle with that. Do I take a leap and go into something that I feel drawn to?
And life is short. And I say, take the leap, take the chance, take the risk. If you didn't have the fortitude to begin your life in your gift and your passion and your talent, it's never too late to get into it.
Yeah, no doubt. All right. Well, that was a pretty cool interview. And I want to tell our listeners about some other authors we have coming up that I am sure they're going to just love. We've got Graham Brown writing for Clive Cussler. It's called Desolation Code. Alex Hay is coming back, The Queen of Fives. Samantha Green Woodruff is also coming back, The Trade-Off. That's her new book coming out. Fiona Davis, have we had her on? Will this be the third time?
I think so. I was just listening to a little live show she had on Instagram today, and I can't wait to talk to her.
I know, she is so fun. The Stolen Queen. Carter Wilson, Tell Me What You Did. Jill Shelvis, Better Than Friends, also coming back for maybe the third time. Heather B. Moore, also returning, Lady Flyer. Mark Greaney, Midnight Black. Andrews and Wilson, we love them. Defense Protocol. Marshall Karp, Don't Tell Me How to Die. Brett Battles, writing for Stuart Woods' Golden Hour. Tess Gerritsen, The Summer Guest. And listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. We are grateful for you, and we just ask that you continue to spread the word, spread our links. You can find us on Facebook, on Instagram, on X, our website, bookstormpodcast.com, and you can find us on YouTube. Just search for Bookstorm and Podcast. We should come right up. Until next time, listeners, one of the best ways to brave the storm is to dive down deep into life-changing fiction.